make hay when the sun shines, and that is exactly what India is doing. And we are literally using sun to electrify our homes, our commercial places as well. You know, government has been talking about the big push on renewable energy. It's an ad nauseum statement that we've been hearing for years now. But in that, solar energy or solar power, it is coming up as the big opportunity. What is the value chain looking like? We're talking about big investments here, and considering the weather of India, sun definitely something where we can make a lot of investments and use it for a greener future as well. So I thought, who else than Dr. Ajay Mathur to join us on the podcast today? He's the Director General at International Solar Alliance, to make us understand what's happening here, how big this opportunity is, what is ISA's role here, and are we on track to achieve the goals that we have set earlier? Dr. Mathur, always a pleasure speaking with you. Finally, you are here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. And may I say that it's such a pleasure to be here with you personally.
No, it's good to have you, Mr. Mathur, and we've had a lot of conversation around renewables. But you know, I just thought to make it very easier for our viewers as well. And you've been in the industry for so long, and there's building interest. We talk about it only from not from the stock market's perspective, but now more people are looking at from their home perspective as well. But on the larger scale, let's talk about it from that angle. Is sun or solar energy in the renewable space the biggest opportunity that India has?
Absolutely. The Prime Minister has taken the lead in bringing solar in our lives. He is looking at 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. That's not that far away.
Yeah.
And we are looking at approximately 280 to 300 of this 500 gigawatts coming from solar. So solar is big. We've also seen in the first 3-4 months of this year that new solar plants, which is actually solar plus wind plus batteries, round the clock solar. So it gives you electricity when you need it, not just when the sun is shining. That the prices are becoming competitive with those of new coal power plants that are coming in. This is great news because this will make the flip that is needed if we can provide enough land, if we can provide enough transmission lines, if we can provide enough money that is needed for this investment to occur.
Yeah, so you spoke about a lot of things. One is round the clock solar power, which is available. Second is the prices, how they are becoming competitive. And third is investment. So let me dwell deeper into all of this. When we talk about investments, are there enough investments made in solar power, or are we seeing it in other? Because even wind is coming up. We have other aspects of green energy coming up as well. So where do investments stand on at a bigger level in the solar space? Are we getting it from public sector or the private sector?
Last year, something like $500 billion was invested in solar. This led to the addition of about 450 gigawatts of capacity addition in 2023 alone. Now, the vast amount of it went to the OECD countries, China, India, Brazil, and possibly 1 or 2 more countries. That's 85%. It's great. These are areas where solar is increasing fast. But in other parts of the world, we are not seeing any solar activity. So when you look at all of Africa, it gets about 3% of this global investment and 3% of the capacity. That's abysmal for a country which has 60% of the world's energy resources.
Yeah, but why is it so low? Like, is it because, and especially when you're saying it's 60% of the world resources, why are we not focusing on Africa then?
There are 2 factors. We spoke to about 100 investors, and Sonal, one of the things we have noticed is that the vast amount of money in this sector comes from the private sector. So it's private investors globally and in India who are investing in this. We talked about 100 of them. Why are you not investing in Africa? And the answer that we got was they were not comfortable that they will get returns. That was number one. The second was that they said, we are not going to go there for one project. We want to see a range, a pipeline of projects. This, therefore, forced us to look at the African track record And what we found was that as far as solar loans was concerned, yes, it's a low base to start with, but solar loans in Africa, the non-repayment rate, or the NPA rate, is less than 2%,
Okay.
which compares, in Asia, in Africa, sorry, not in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, it's about 6%. So
Okay.
2% is up,
Yeah.
it's very low. Therefore, it is a perceived risk.
Okay.
So what we are doing as ISA is creating a global solar facility to be able to provide guarantees to the people who invest in solar. We have done one pilot. It was in the Democratic Republic of Congo for solar mini grids. Now, we especially want to push small solar, not just large solar alone. And there, IFC was providing the main amount of investment. But DRC, being a politically sensitive country, they wanted them to take MEGA insurance.
Got it.
They did, but it increased the cost of electricity.
Yeah.
What we did as the pilot of the global solar facility is to provide a guarantee that Nuru, this company which is setting up the solar mini grids in DRC, would pay MEGA.
Okay.
That alone brought the cost of electricity down by 20%.
Wow.
This is the kind of change that we want to happen. So, on the one hand, we are pushing money going to Africa. What we also did last year was that we identified solar startups. These are guys who have technologies that work, that people are willing to buy. These are guys who have the business models that it takes to take them to business.
Got it.
We want them to increase. So we identified 20, over 180 applied, and these 20 were then provided active hand holding on raising money, on technological cooperation. There are all kinds of technologies that that we push: large solar, small solar, solar pumps, solar cold storage, waste, etc. And on brand building. Ultimately, I would like some of these 20 guys to become the Amazons of tomorrow, providing solar services across Africa and possibly across the world. We are hoping that this mix of demand and supply would change first in Africa, and then we will take it to other parts of the world. So the solar startups we this year took to the Asia Pacific and to India. And next year we'll take it to Latin America, and so on.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you next. You said our goal is to help identify solar entrepreneurs.
Yes.
You had spoken about it. And this is a big part of what we are building in India as well. And a lot of people, they ask me, what do you think is a right opportunity in new energy? And the first word that comes to my mind is definitely solar energy.
That's right.
So in India, have you started that project already? Have you identified solar startups? What are you looking for in entrepreneurs?
So I have identified 10 startups this year, and they were introduced to the world at the Reinvest conference in Gandhinagar, and the Honorable Prime Minister was there. He spent a lot of time with them. These are guys who are doing all kinds of interesting things, like setting up a system where batteries can be swapped for two-wheelers, like providing solar services to homes, whether it is an independent system or whether it's a solar home system, smaller one. There are people who are getting into solar waste management. So how on earth do you take care of the solar waste that will be produced? Because huge amounts of solar waste will be produced. All kinds of things. There are guys who focus on creating solarizing of health facilities.
Okay.
So we've got all kinds of people in this mix, and we are delighted that we are working with them.
That's amazing and so creative, because the entire value chain has so much to offer in the solar energy. Dr. Mathur, I wanted to understand, when you spoke about the cost effectiveness also, and what's happening in Africa was people perceive that maybe we won't get the returns versus the traditional energy. But how does it really work? Are the returns on, say, solar energy better than traditional, or do you think gradually it'll improve, if not right now?
There is a large number of companies in India which have investments in solar energy and have seen no reduction in the returns that they get. In other words, there are an adequate number of applications where you can apply money and get returns. So, for example, we have a large number of large-scale solar which are grid connected. All of these are private funded.
Correct.
They sell electricity to the grid and they are paid for that electricity.
Okay.
Now, setting up requires a lot of money. We did a back of envelope calculation. A 100 megawatt coal power plant costs about 900 crore rupees.
Okay.
A plant which will produce an equivalent amount of electricity as is needed by you and me throughout the day, even at 6 o'clock in the morning, solar plus wind plus storage costs about 1920 crore rupees. Okay. So 900 versus 1920, so almost double.
Double, yeah.
More than double, actually. That is the amount of money that you need. This means that we must have an adequate framework for getting this money.
Correct.
How do we get it? Because, getting twice the money is no big deal for India.
Right now, yeah, everyone's able to put in the money
Right.
that is required.
But what will happen, Sonal, is that money will flow out of other sectors and come
go
into this
here.
sector, and then there'll be a sucking sound you will hear. So what can we do? Can we get the money that we goes in for investment, the loans that people provide for construction, can we half the tenor? So instead of 7 years, it becomes 3 years. Then with the same amount of money, you can do double.
Correct.
We can, because a solar project or a wind project takes approximately 2 years to build, as opposed to 4 years at the best for coal power plants. 2 years is great because 2 years of setting up, 1 year in which you build up the capacity to that your returns, how much you get and whether they were paid on time. At that point of time, raise a bond. That gives money to you and you can pay back the loan.
Correct.
But we will need to create the facilities there. What kinds of opportunities? InvITs, possibly. Bonds which take your pension money and mine, possibly. But the point is that creating these funds would enable us to invest in solar energy in the amounts that is needed.
So right now, what are the facilities available if someone wants to? So like how you provided assistance in Africa for somebody to come, it cut the cost despite insurance. In India, is there something available in terms of funding, financing, some sort of subvention scheme? Or do we need what you just told us in terms of more InvITs, more green bonds, maybe more funds?
Sonal, today in India, solar in almost every application is cost effective. It makes money.
Okay.
It makes as much money as investment in any other source.
Okay.
Yes, there are certain new areas where some kind of protection of the money is needed. So, for example, if you're making a large solar project, you're selling the electricity to the Solar Energy Corporation of India, that's providing the kind of default payment guarantee mechanism that is needed. There is a payment guarantee mechanism that Solar Energy Corporation of India has, and you can use that to make sure that you get the returns that you want.
Got it.
Similarly, for smaller applications like the PM's rooftop program,
yeah.
we are looking at 1 crore households. What are the kinds of payment guarantees? All of these guys pay their electricity bill.
Yeah.
And that becomes the basis for making sure that they will continue to pay in the future even after solar is put up. So that's again a very different level of investment, but an investment that makes great sense to build up the vendors who provide that services to set up rooftops on your roof and mine as far as solar is concerned.
Absolutely. So we start with 1 crore, but the opportunity is huge here. Right?
Absolutely. And it's across the country.
It's across the country, exactly. So we just need to ensure that the pilot is successful, or whatever. The initial tranche is very successful.
Well, we've already seen a huge amount of success in this. For years, our grid connected solar was doing great. But now, the rooftop solar has also taken off. After the Prime Minister launched these programs, we have seen a huge amount of interest in these programs also. Yes, it changes from state to state, but it's taking off.
So, I just wanted to follow up on that, because when you said the execution has been successful, has the maintenance been as successful as well? Because I was reading a report from a foreign press, and they spoke about how maintenance has been an issue, and they cited some Rockefeller Foundation's report, which Rockefeller didn't agree with.
Yeah.
But still, in the hinterlands where we are seeing the solar grids coming up, is maintenance an issue, or that is also under control?
Maintenance was an issue. But what has happened in the last, at least 10, 15 years is that with the privatization of the infrastructure, they get payment if they deliver electricity. It is important for them to maintain. And this has led to the creation of a maintenance infrastructure business. So either if you're large enough, you build up your own infrastructure.
Correct.
If you are not, then you hire somebody to do it. There is a problem that if you have got a single system at home, there aren't enough trained people in the rural areas. In urban areas, there are. In rural areas, who can maintain, for example, a solar pump. But that is being taken care of as we speak. You spoke of the Rockefeller report. The report that said that maintenance was a problem.
Yeah.
That largely dealt with solar mini grid projects.
Correct.
The vast numbers of them had been set up with support from international agencies who came in, set it up, and made no efforts at all about long-term maintenance.
Got it.
But once we moved to the private sector mode of even off-grid solar, then we suddenly saw a very, very different picture.
Okay. So, yeah, of course, even Rockefeller refuted that report and said it is not correct. It's got more to do with what happened some years back. But I just thought, what is it like right now on ground? Important to understand that. The third pillar, storage. Where do we stand there?
As far as storage is concerned, we have seen an 80% decline in the price of batteries since 2010. And this decline will continue. But even at the current price of batteries, we are seeing them become cost effective in terms of the cost of electricity together with wind and solar. We've also seen new kinds of storage develop. So, for example, in India, pumped storage has developed amazingly well. You have a company, actually more than one companies, which make a living out of making solar, about pumped hydro and solar combination. So what we see is that, number one, we are seeing less and less amounts of materials being used in batteries. We are seeing the development of new kinds of technologies, and we are seeing that we are finding new deposits of the critical minerals that we were looking at. So, for example, we were very worried about lithium.
Yeah, Jammu and Kashmir.
We found it in Jammu and Kashmir, where we had actually looked for bauxite in the 1960s.
Okay.
And now we find lithium, because now we are looking for lithium. So, all of these three things together tell me that the storage costs will only decrease with time. They've already led us for solar electricity to become cost effective. But they are also leading us to even more and cheaper electricity in the future.
So storage will also be taken care of, is what you're saying. And it's already taken care of.
It's already taken care of. It will become better.
Better. Are there any other missing pieces in the puzzle on the value chain when we talk about solar cells, solar modules? We had that import duty earlier. There have been changes made there. Where are we there? I
Sonal, this is a big question, but both at the starting part, where do you get the panels from?
correct,
And at the end part, what do you do with the solar waste?
correct.
Both of these are questions have which for which the ultimate answers are not yet there. We have
Okay.
some answers. So on the solar panel production, one of the greatest problems is the concentration of solar production. The large amount of solar production occurs in one country, China.
China.
By itself, that's not a problem because what they've been able to do is deliver it at costs that we like. The problem is that because there's concentration in one country, it leads to supply chain choking. So there are months in the year, 2 or 3 months, when, for example, solar cells are not available in Africa. And if you're looking at, under any normal circumstances, a tripling of demand by 2030, could be as high as 88 times if solar, hydrogen, and electric vehicles come in. This means that the supply chains have to become shorter. This means that we'll have to set up manufacturing facilities across the world. So then we looked at the economics. And when we looked at the economics, what we found was that if you're importing solar cells and making solar modules, it gives local jobs. It is cost effective. It can be done almost anywhere if there are adequate volumes.
Correct.
But if you have to make solar cells, then to compete,
It's a
you
problem.
need to provide incentives. The US provides it through the Inflation Reduction Act, India provides it through the performance linked incentives. But for the geographical diversification to occur, we would need these kinds of incentives to be provided by different geographies.
Otherwise, the dependence on China could continue. So, in that case, do we have technology if the incentives are provided, or we need technology transfers? That's another big question mark.
So this is a tough question. To a very large extent, the technologies are there for manufacturing solar cells. But when we look at the machines that are needed to manufacture these solar production facilities, that's where the challenge lies. It's not an insurmountable challenge. Those machines can be made, for example, in India or anywhere else, but it would mean that we focus, that we provide incentives at that level as well for these and promote collaboration between the guys who manufacture it, and they get the R&D support from research institutions, from academic institutions, and so on.
And they've been more than willing to provide that support. We have seen that.
Well, where the demand is there
They are.
and where the industry asks, then we have seen the academic sector and the research sector provide the kinds of inputs. We've been successful in that. But where it is led by the opposite, that the academic institutions and the research institutions have a bee up their bonnet, but there's no demand, that has a spotty record. It's not that it's never been successful, it's been successful, but it's been a spotty record.
Okay. Now back to the investments, because I wanted to ask you then, but I just missed it. 85% investments are coming to OECD countries, China and India. How much is India a part of that?
India gets approximately, the total investment was about 500 billion last year, and of that, approximately something of the order of 20 billion came to India.
Okay.
So it is not 10%,
Yeah.
but it is nearly 5%.
Yeah. So, but would we be self-sufficient in getting the investments around it, or we need external help in some way?
Okay. As far as India is concerned, I think we have gotten out of the mental attitude that government needs to invest in solar.
Yeah, good.
The vast amount of debt that is needed is provided by Indian financial institutions. The vast amount of equity that is needed is provided by Indian financial institutions, though we do get equity from international institutions as well. Uh, Remember, these are days which are early days. How the mix would occur in the future is anybody's guess. But my feeling is that for the early part, for the investment, when you are still building the investments, we will still have a lot of equity coming in externally. But once you have operational plants, we will see those plants that are set up being sold for domestic money.
So, how much of the solar capacity is already set versus the 2030 goals that we have?
So, as of the 31st of September, 30th of September, which was half of our financial year, we had a total of about 90 gigawatts of capacity that was already installed. I would note that 15 gigawatts of this was installed in the first 6 months of this financial year. And we are looking at another 20 plus, even as high as 24 gigawatts being installed in the second half. So this year, I think at 40 megawatts, we would have made a huge turning point in our ability to meet the demands, the energy demands through solar.
So, while we are making those strides, if we talk about state-wise performance, do you think some states stand out when it comes to the investments that we are seeing here or capacity additions? Usually, people would say Rajasthan because it's the
Yeah, so no, this is a little bit of a challenge because we have right now something that we call the ISTS. But essentially, you can take electricity from anywhere
And
in the
just put
country
it-
to
yeah.
anywhere else and not pay any surcharges on it. What this has done is that the vast amount of solar capacity has developed in the west of the country and in the south of the country, and is carried on our national grid to where you and I use it in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Bangalore, Hyderabad, etc. The ISTS waiver, this surcharge waiver, finishes in, I think, March 2025 or something of that
Okay.
sort. And at that point of time, we would start seeing a more state based approach. So the closer they are to the load center, the better it is. Theoretically, all the electricity demand that we have in 2070 could be met by installations in the Thar Desert. But do we want that?
that'll be
Just as we were talking
Yeah.
earlier about the supply chain lengths,
Yeah, it'll be
it's
concentration.
absolutely similar. I personally would like states to develop land pockets
correct.
where solar or wind or battery, hopefully all three, can be put up. Has it been done? Yes. We see in Gujarat, in the Khavda state, 30 gigawatts of capacity of solar and wind. I think states will need to think of the kinds of financial models that they put into place so that people can transfer land to them, and then they can transfer land to the solar and or wind or battery developers. This is something that each state needs to do.
But do we have enough land? That's a big question.
No, if you develop the kinds of financial models,
Then it
then
would
I
be
think we
available.
can. Yes, there is a limitation because as far as investors are concerned, there is a limit to which they will pay for land.
Correct.
But I think we need to find that out.
All right. So, now that we've spoken about where India stands or where different states stand and how prices have been, I want to understand what is the next step for ISA. What are you planning? You spoke about some big events that you have hosted this year. We have COP coming up. You are acting as the big push for entrepreneurs as well. What is the next plan? How are you bridging that gap?
At ISA, we want to make solar energy as the energy source of choice in all our member countries. This means that number one, solar electricity should be available to you and me.
Correct.
That's number one.
Correct.
And it should be available at a price that you and I can afford. This means that, for example, the most successful example that we have right now is of Cuba, but there are other countries where we have changed the regulations to allow private sector to come in, to pay for electricity rather than the plant, to auction the capacity and therefore get the best prices, and to do it again and again and again. That's the first part. The second is, every leader asks me, okay, so we do this, but who will run it? And therefore, capacity building. That becomes very important. We have right now trained about 4,500 people at all levels. So what we want to do is to create the guys who will manufacture, who will implement, who will manage the solar plants. That's number one. We also want trained engineers. So for example, for the small island states and the developing countries, we support them to send one or two people to do a master's at IIT Delhi. This we believe, and similarly we do programs for policymakers, etc. We believe that this spectrum of capacity building helps build up capacity. We have also started a program which looks at local organizations that help in capacity building. This was done largely through the push of our co-president France, and by having local centers, we call them star centers.
Okay.
Solar Technology and Applications Resource Centers, if I'm not wrong. These star centers are based in Ethiopia, in Cuba, in Vanuatu, in Kiribati. The goal is that they know the conditions there. We train the trainers, the master trainers, and then they go back and train a much larger number of people. We want these centers to be self-sufficient. So what we can do is give them the equipment up front. For example, for the testing of solar cells.
Correct.
So all the solar cells that they import are tested and they get a fees on it. And therefore they become self-sustaining. We want these kinds of facilities to come up across the world. What we have learned in India, we believe can be a template for all of these countries, all of these developing countries.
That's very interesting, and there's so much happening on ground. We keep hearing, but to get it firsthand from you is definitely amazing. I would like to have spoken to you a lot more, but I have to end this conversation. But I wanted to understand and get your parting thoughts as well. Something that you think needs to change immediately, or something that's just on your mind when it comes to solar energy in India and how we can change the landscape quickly.
So I think there are two parts that we need to change. The first thing that we need to focus on is manufacturing. And as I said, manufacturing the machines that make it is absolutely at the top of the agenda. The second thing we need to change is how we bring large amounts of money into this thing, together with the land that we need. So I think if we do these things, we would have enabled the solar sector to grow exponentially in the years to come.
So as I said, make hay when the sun shines. That's something
That's
that
how
we
you
should
started it, and it's absolutely right.
And that's how we should go about it, because that's the way for greener future for sure in the country which has abundance of sunlight, right?
Absolutely.
That we need to make the most of it. Such a pleasure always speaking with you, Dr. Mathur. Your energy is like what solar energy would have brought, or electrified the conversation as well. So thank you so much for coming down to Mumbai and having this conversation with us.
Thank you very much, Sonal. It's been a huge pleasure to obviously interact with you all this time, and especially to be here in person.
Okay, all right. On that note, we'll take your leave on this special podcast today. Keep writing to us like you always do to understand the topics that you want us to get and the guests you want us to get on the podcast as well. Always a pleasure hearing from you as well. Thank you so much for tuning in.